Well, hello there and welcome to The World Today on Channels Television. I'm Cynthia Are. We begin right here in Nigeria, where the president has appealed to the leadership of the Nigerian Union of Teachers and other labor unions to allow schools in Nigeria to reopen on September the 22nd. Dr. Goodluck Jonathan explained to journalists that closing public institutions because of a case that has been dealt with will not speak well of the country's image. Our State House correspondent Chukwuma Onwekusi has this report.
The president has to do this because of the urgency of the matter. Out there, the controversy has been raging over whether or not schools should reopen on September 22nd following the outbreak of Ebola. But President Jonathan said the case has been properly managed and the disease contained. He thanked all Nigerians and state governors for the effort to contain the outbreak.
Nobody in Nigeria has Ebola now. All the people that had the symptoms of Ebola have recovered. We lost, out of the 19, we lost 7, and the others have recovered. I must use this opportunity to thank all Nigerians in terms of managing the Ebola virus. This is one thing that the whole country came together, worked together. There were no issues of politics, there were no issues of religion, there was no issues of ethnicity, and that is why we've been able to contain the Ebola.
On the closure of public institutions, this is what the president has to say.
As long as we Nigerians close all our public institutions because of Ebola, the dispatches that go to the whole world is that Ebola is a problem in Nigeria. And as long as we are declared Ebola is a problem in Nigeria, any Nigerian that travel out will be treated as somebody with Ebola. We've been able to manage Ebola, the whole world is happy with us. And we must tell the world that we have managed Ebola and no Nigerian should be segregated because of Ebola. Ebola is no longer a threat to Nigeria. And we must tell the world that we have been able to contain Ebola. Yes, Ebola is in the West Coast. It could go to Ghana, it could happen in Ghana, it could happen in Senegal, it could happen in any of the West African countries, or even beyond. But they have not closed down their institutions. If we still have the Ebola case, definitely we will not open the institutions.
The president makes this appeal.
Plead with NUT and other labor unions that this does not require industrial action. They should commend government. They work with us, of them are Nigerians. All Nigerians work together to make sure that we manage the Ebola. Why do we want to create problems?
The president says his administration is open to discuss such sensitive matters with anyone, and that a threat to industrial action over issues that can amicably be resolved will not do the country any good. Chukwuma Onwekusi, Channels Television News.
Now, the Ebola virus disease is not only claiming lives, but could also impact on the economies of the affected countries. The World Bank has confirmed that the outbreak could have a catastrophic impact on the economies of Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Now, based on the above, President Barack Obama has announced a plan to contain the spread of the virus in West Africa, indicating the world is relying on the United States to confront the outbreak that has killed more than 2,000 people.
President Obama went to the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta to meet with health workers, where he announced the United States is doing its part to combat an outbreak that he said is spiraling out of control and posing a potential threat to global security.
The world is looking to us, the United States, and it's a responsibility that we embrace. We're prepared to take leadership on this, to provide the kinds of capabilities that only America has, and to mobilize the world in ways that only America can do.
The United States has already committed more than $100 million, shipped medical supplies, and deployed experts since the outbreak began in March. Now more help will be on the way. It will include 3,000 U.S. troops who will help set up and operate a military command center in Liberia and a logistics facility in Senegal to facilitate the transportation of experts and supplies. The U.S. will set up hospital facilities and train Africans to deal with the outbreak. It will also provide technology and training needed to stop the disease. While the risk that the epidemic may spread to the United States is low, Mr. Obama said Ebola could have destabilizing effect in the region and the world.
If the outbreak is not stopped now, we could be looking at hundreds of thousands of people infected with profound political and economic and security implications for all of us.
Aside from controlling the epidemic, President Obama's strategy aims to blunt the economic and political tolls on the region. Liberia and Sierra Leone are still recovering from devastating civil wars. The U.S. president on Tuesday called on other countries to make good on their commitment to send more personnel, supplies and money and seize the opportunity to save countless lives.
For more on the situation, I'm now being joined by the Voice of America's Carol Pearson, who is the health correspondent from Washington, D.C. Carol, thank you so much for joining us again on The World Today. Now, besides ordering about 3,000 troops to the region and also building new facilities, what other moves are being made by the United States in controlling the spread of the Ebola virus disease?
Well, there are several. There have been hearings on both the U.S. Senate and today in the U.S. House of Representatives on this particular disease, and they've had representatives from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, Dr. Anthony Fauci from the National Institutes of Health, and other infectious disease experts, and Dr. Kent Brantley, who was working in Liberia when he got Ebola. One of the things that they talked about was the fact that if this disease is not stopped and contained, not only will it devastate the countries, but the fact that it could end up lasting for years and could spread beyond the 3 countries that are affected now. They're going to be providing about 500 healthcare workers a week. They're going to be training people. They're going to be providing home health care kits. Doctors Without Borders, MSF, has had a very good role model because not one of its doctors has been infected with the Ebola virus, despite their close contact in dealing with Ebola patients. They're going to be working with MSF. They're going to be working with USAID. It's a multi-pronged approach to containing the virus.
Now, Carol, the U.S. Congress has also taken up Ebola this week. Could you tell us about the hearings going on in Capitol Hill?
Well, the hearings are mostly about the severity.
Well, we seem to be having a bit of audio trouble, but we will definitely try to reconnect with Carol Pearson concerning that. But for now, let's go to other stories. Now, despite the ongoing crisis in South Sudan, the government has issued an order to non-governmental organizations and private firms to fire certain foreign workers by mid-October. The Labour Ministry says roles ranging from receptionist to executive director should in future be filled by South Sudanese nationals. The charity Oxfam also says the move will have a huge impact on aid programs. Nearly 2 million people have fled their homes since 2 factions of the ruling party fell out in December. Thousands of people have died in the fighting, and aid agencies say up to 4 million people are at risk of food shortages because of the crisis. Now, the violence in Syria continues, and the latest spate of attacks has left about 50 people dead. Activists believe the Syrian government is responsible for that in an opposition-held town. 6 children were among those who died at Tal Bisa in Homs province, and it was bombarded for 2 days, and a dozen rebel fighters were also killed in the process. Meanwhile, at least 34 children have died in another opposition-held area of Syria, and that's reportedly after being given contaminated measles vaccinations. The main opposition alliance, which is the National Coalition, has launched an investigation and halted the vaccination program it was organizing in the northern province of Idlib. Now, President Barack Obama is extra busy. Not only is he seeking ways to help contain the spread of the Ebola virus disease, he's also addressing U.S. troops involved in his new strategy to degrade and destroy Islamic State militants in Iraq as well as Syria. The president has said U.S. troops will not have a combat mission in Iraq under the strategy outlined last week, but ground forces may be sent if a new international coalition fails to defeat IS. General Martin Dempsey, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told the Senate committee that an international effort against IS was currently the appropriate way forward. Well, stay with us on The World Today. When we come back after the break, we will give you an update concerning the two Britons who were murdered in Thailand. Please. Welcome back. You're also watching The World Today on Channels Television. Now, police investigating the murders of two British tourists in Thailand have said two Britons are possible suspects and will face questioning. Hannah Withridge, who was 23, and David Miller, who's 24.